Hi everyone, I'm Mike Abadi and welcome to VTblogosphereTV. We are at episode 38 and we have the wonderful opportunity to welcome back Jack McCullough, who was one of the original founders of Green Mountain Daily, and he also publishes independently Rational Resistance. Lives in Burnley, right here in Montpelier, sorry about that, with his family, practicing lawyer. And we are here to consider sort of the wider blogosphere and how it interacts with other social networks, fair to say.
That's how I look at it, yeah.
And we have an excellent case study here right now with the, help me with the proper name of it, Susan B. Komen for the...
Susan B. Komen Foundation for the Cure, I believe is what it's called.
Okay. And you've been particularly fascinated with how activism has interacted with Facebook to roll back a major decision Komen made in who they and how they fund. If you just want to share the inception of the controversy and how it's played out over time, it's almost an ever-changing headline. It is February 9th right now, for those keeping track at home. The story may keep moving.
I think it will. It's been a very interesting and exciting couple of weeks. And to lay it out, Susan B. Komen is or Susan G. Komen, I'm not sure, I think it's G.
G sounds right.
Susan
more
G.
right
Komen
in my ear,
is the pink ribbon people. And they have, in general, a great public image, or had a great public image up until a week ago, where they run the races for the cure. They're the company or the foundation that gets everyone from Colonel Sanders to cell phone companies to produce pink products, and they get a cut of the proceeds of the pink products, and they're huge. They're $93 million a year in their budget. So. Susan G. Komen spends $1 a year for every mile the Earth is from the sun.
Okay.
Funny coincidence there.
93 million.
And really, everywhere you look, you see Susan G. Komen stuff, and it's all pink.
Sure.
And you're not allowed to use any of that stuff if you're not affiliated with Susan G. Komen. And it was just over a week ago that it became public that the foundation had decided to defund Planned Parenthood. They were giving a few Planned Parenthood affiliates a couple of small grants, total of under $1 million, to do breast cancer screening, breast health education, and they decided that they were going to stop funding Planned Parenthood.
Right.
Their stated reason was that they're not going to fund they just adopted a new policy that they're not going to fund any entity that's under investigation by any body of government, state, local, federal government. And over the last couple of months, I guess, they were telling these Planned Parenthood affiliates they were going to be cut off. But the news broke a week ago Tuesday, I think. So that would have been like February 1st or something.
And that was, Planned Parenthood went to the media? Is that, and I understand Komen was upset that they sort of saw that move of transparency as a form of politicization, that somehow Planned Parenthood politicized it by actually, making public their decision.
I always think it's kind of funny when you see someone who makes a political decision and then they complain about the other side politicizing it.
Yeah,
but that's clearly what happened here.
Right. Now, in terms of the presentation of Komen's decision, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot. In the mainstream media, I've just heard it again on NPR, that somehow Komen was bowing to external pressure, sort of pro-life groups pushed them in this direction, but it's becoming clearer and clearer that Komen made this decision internally with its own players, and I don't know if you have a sense of that external-internal dynamic.
Well, my sense is That's a combination of the two. I gather that Susan G. Komen Foundation has really been under pressure for a number of years from the anti-choice groups because they've been providing some funding to Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
And
even though it's exclusively for breast cancer screening.
yes, absolutely. But when I started getting involved in this issue, and I went onto Facebook, I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but went onto Facebook and looked for Boycott Susan G. Komen Foundation. At least one of the Facebook groups to boycott Susan G. Komen is because they were providing funding to Planned Parenthood.
Ever.
Yes.
Right.
But, so there was some external pressure, but it's also very clearly internal and within the workings of the foundation and the people that run the foundation. And I did, one of the many blog posts I've done on this topic looks at some of the people who are pulling the strings at Susan G. Komen to make this happen. The person who's gotten the most attention is this Karen Handel,
Mm-hmm.
who, when she was running for governor of Georgia, was it Georgia or Alabama?
I think it was Georgia.
Georgia. She was endorsed by Sarah Palin, and she's a big Caribou Barbie fan apparently, but and she was running on an anti-choice, anti-Planned Parenthood platform, and apparently was too conservative to be elected by the Republican voters of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Newt Gingrich's home state.
exactly. So she went from there to, she got hired by the Susan G. Komen Foundation as their policy director or external affairs vice president. And
So they must have known what they were getting when they hired her.
they clearly knew what they were getting. She was very prominent in the anti-choice movement. And one of the things that I found out from pulling together a whole variety of news reports is that in addition to her, Susan G. Komen was getting a lot of influence from another prominent anti-choice agitator's name I'm not thinking of at the moment. And they, in a recent hiring process, they had to hire another vice president for public relations or something. They used as a consultant Ari Fleischer, who used to be Bush's press secretary and who was particularly nasty in that job.
Right.
So again, they were clearly in the hiring of Ari Fleischer, in the decisions they were making to bring Karen Handel in. They were clearly looking for the anti-choice angle.
Mm-hmm.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. Now, Fleischer kind of is an old hand at misrepresenting what an organization is doing, and it was odd to see his name popping up there, sort of as an outside consultant, I guess.
Yes, he says he charged them, although he gave them a break on his usual fee for hiring, and he's actually got a Vermont connection because he went to Middlebury.
Oh, did he?
As an undergraduate, as I recall it.
When Jim Douglas, probably after Jim Douglas.
Way
was
after
there.
Douglas. I think he's a lot younger than Douglas.
Right, right. So, kind of, Eddie Garcia captured it really well. He put up a Facebook post posting a link to some article about sort of the latest information coming out of this Komen scandal, and he put up a little blurb just saying we're going to need a bigger internet. It felt like a whole sort of section of the internet has been devoted to this controversy, and you saw Facebook is almost like home base where sort of people who are political and people who are not so political, but pro-choice, could interact and move the issue. You mentioned a number of immediately created boycott Komen Facebook pages created.
Oh, it was wild. That first night, it was a Tuesday night, and I was on Facebook, because I kind of live on Facebook, And I saw someone of my friends posted a story about Susan G. Komen defunding Planned Parenthood. I typed in a comment saying, well, this is enough to make me want to boycott Susan G. Komen. From there, I thought, well, let's see what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
I searched to see if there was a group, Boycott Susan G. Komen, and there had just been one started up. There were like 2 people when I first found out about it. I was probably member number 15 in the whole group, and it just over the course of that evening, it went up well into the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were posting news and signing up and praising this Susan G. Komen boycott organization. And then the other thing that was going on at the same time was all of us Boycott Susan G. Komen people were also going to the Facebook page of the Susan G. Komen Foundation. And
Writing on their wall?
writing on their wall, that's right. And you really couldn't keep up because we were, there were probably hundreds of people writing on the wall at Susan G. Komen. The Susan G. Komen people had their staff people sitting there at the computers deleting the posts as fast as they could.
Erasing graffiti, so to speak, on the wall.
Exactly, erasing the graffiti on the wall, but they couldn't keep up because there were too many of us up there criticizing them for being anti-woman, for anti-woman's health, anti-choice, posting our blog posts and news stories that we'd been generating.
Right.
And then the other funny thing about it is that the way the Susan G. Komen Foundation has their wall set up, when you go to it, you have a choice between immediately seeing what public members are posting or what the foundation is posting.
The official words of
The official words, and the default is to go to the official Susan G. Komen postings.
Mm-hmm.
And for like a day or two, they had no substantive comments at all from their people about the controversy. So you went there, and what you saw immediately was their latest corporate sponsor that they lined up, which was Energizer batteries, I think.
Uh-huh.
Terrible night for them, Energizer batteries, to become associated with them.
So that's something I know that Komen was criticized for, is just not getting ahead of this. And you saw them not on their Facebook page addressing this issue directly and kind of letting the message, completely get away from them. And it sounds like in all media they hunkered down and were quiet, and then kind of came out with some contradictory statements about how they made the decision internally.
Well, that is the polite way to put it. I would say that they definitely, first, they started out by losing control of the story altogether. Then they trotted out their president and founder, Susan Brinker, or Nancy Brinker.
Brinker's definitely the last name there, yeah.
To go on MSNBC and be interviewed by Andrea Mitchell, and she just lied. There's absolutely no question. She lied about the decision and why they made the decision they made.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrea Mitchell gave her a very hard time about it, and she came across looking very, very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the other things I've seen is there already are a couple of people posting and circulating analyses from public relations professionals looking at this as a case study of a way to demolish the reputation of a very well-respected organization,
right,
literally overnight.
Right. Yeah. Always seen as apolitical. Who can argue with finding a cure for breast cancer,
right,
and completely upending that. Now you've got this situation where the anti-choice forces will be up in arms when they say, "Oh, we're going to refund Planned Parenthood," which still isn't clear. They've kind of done this: we'll fund existing grants and use, guidelines to try. I mean, very political language to walk back the initial decision. But
it's pretty weaselly. It's very hard to tell exactly what's going to happen. I don't think anyone's confident that they're going to see any money from Susan G. Komen in the future.
Yeah, no one's saying no longer boycott them, we've won. I mean,
Right.
It isn't clear.
Oh, that's the other part of it. They have totally lost the support of the people who signed on to boycott them. I will never,
There's
and I'm
no
sure
going
that
back.
most people are never going back to them.
Right, right. Now, the pretense of we won't fund an organization that is under investigation, my understanding is they're using a House hearing, sort of a Republican House investigation of Planned Parenthood, and I don't know what that investigation is charged to do, but that in and of itself is clearly a political investigation.
Oh yeah, it's a typical thing. You know, any one member of Congress can start up an investigation, which is what this one right-wing Republican from Florida is doing, and they're using that, and they're saying, well, we have this policy that says we're not going to fund any organization that is under investigation. Meanwhile, in the day or two or three after the story initially broke, Mother Jones posted a story on their webpage and on their Facebook page that says Susan G. Komen is giving $12 million a year to Penn State. And Penn State itself is under investigation for the complicity of its people in the child rape allegations.
Right, right. So
and they haven't defunded Penn State.
So the pretense doesn't even hold water, sort of by its own internal logic.
No.
Handel has now stepped down. I guess she has not signed a severance package, which means she can keep talking. That's a kind of a rare thing. That's my understanding of. But that I guess is a real problem for Komen in that it looks like she's kind of going to become an anti-choice martyr and share how she was wronged. It's not like she signed off a severance package where she's agreed to keep quiet. And then within Komen, it's clear that they had an internal battle where I think there was a subcommittee that looked into what would happen if we defunded Planned Parenthood, and their conclusions would that poor women's health would suffer and Komen's image would suffer. So those unhappy people within Komen are anonymously talking to the media to say, this is how the decision went down.
In addition to which, some of the doctors at the upper levels of different state Komen foundations are also saying, I'm out of here. I'm not going to stick around while you're doing stuff like this. And these are people who have quite a bit of credibility.
Right. There's my understanding also is that the local affiliates do a lot of the granting. It isn't done from the sort of national organization, and a lot of the affiliates were caught off guard by this change in decision, and we're not on board for it.
Not at all. I had one of the funny posts on Facebook that first night was from a friend who said, I've got a meeting to plan PR for an event with our local Komen affiliate. Any suggestions on what I can say and not get fired?
Right.
And my initial response was, I can't think of a single thing, but then I sent her one of these articles about PR and how badly they'd blown the PR. And in the meantime, she'd heard from the local Komen people saying, this isn't us. We don't want to talk about this at all. We were focusing on the event, but this isn't our decision.
Right, right. The other real problem for Komen now is that they are under a lot of scrutiny just for how their organization functions, independently of whether or not they grant Planned Parenthood. And that $93 million you mentioned, I guess the amount of that goes to research isn't that impressive, and they do spend a lot of sort of generating, marketing their brand and increasing their, footprint, I guess, in the world of charity.
Absolutely. Out of that $93 million, they spend $1 million or so a year on suing other nonprofits and causes. Any other group who wants to call their event the race to end homelessness, the race to do this, the race to save
They've
the
got
spotted
that
owl.
trademarked.
They're suing them about that.
So they've been, you know, formerly very brand savvy, like really thinking like, how do we protect our brand?
Yes, but even at that, you know, what has become a little more public is some of the criticism that has been circulating at a very low level and most people haven't been aware of for a number of years, which is Komen has certainly presented themselves as a very apolitical organization. Meanwhile, they've been highly resistant to things like looking at environmental factors and what role they play in breast cancer or other forms of cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been very eager to align themselves with companies like Kentucky Fried Chicken. And you can get a big pink bucket at Kentucky Fried Chicken, but aligning themselves with companies that make products that could very well contribute to cancer and definitely contribute to other serious health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were never the apolitical entity they claimed to be.
Right, and now people are taking a look under a microscope and just seeing what is this.
And they volunteered for it.
Giant pink. That's right. That's right. They chose that mission. So on the other side, Planned Parenthood is just reaping. They aren't even having to fundraise off of this. People write blog posts and then have a link at the bottom. Contribute $5 to Planned Parenthood. And
that's what I did right away. Yeah, and they created a fund that's up to. Last I heard, it was up to $4 million. It's probably more now.
Mm-hmm.
Directly coming from people protesting the defunding. Mike Bloomberg, the mayor of New York City, donated $250,000.
Personally out of pocket.
And there are other people who've made large contributions like that.
Right. So if you were advising the Komen Foundation on how to resurrect its image, I mean, where do they go from here?
I think it's very hard. I think that one of the things they need to do is do some serious outreach to local women's health organizations so they can get themselves married to these other groups in the public eye. At least that's, you know, I'm not a public relations expert.
Mm-hmm.
I know what
Right.
what doesn't work.
Right.
But in this case, for years, people all over the country have wanted to be visibly affiliated with Susan G. Komen because it made them look good.
Mm-hmm.
Now Susan G. Komen has to do the opposite, find other organizations that have credibility and, you know, cozy up to them.
Right. Detoxify somehow.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Handle is the first of many to go, or I don't know just if they're going to do a house cleaning or what. But what
Well, she clearly had to go. I hadn't heard that she hadn't signed a severance agreement,
that was my
but
understanding.
it makes sense because she's certainly shooting her mouth off.
She's free to talk. Yeah.
Usually, when one of the top people at these organizations screws up and gets fired, they issue this nice statement about how they're leaving to spend more time with their family.
That's right.
It's always
and she didn't.
always
do
a
that.
guarantee that the person was fired when they say that.
Right. She left expressing dissatisfaction with how the matter was handled in the
Very-
official resignation letter.
Very harsh, bitter set of comments.
Uh-huh. So it's one of those things where you can feel like, geez, maybe the watchdog function of the internet really works, and that sanity prevails in this world. Or is that the takeaway message?
Well, I think sometimes it does. It's about a year ago, you might remember Malcolm Gladwell had an article in the New Yorker that was controversial at the time because it was just as things were ramping up in the Middle East, and he was basically saying social media, Twitter, Facebook, just are never going to work. You know, they are never going to be good enough and get people involved enough to create and sustain a mass movement that's actually going to be effective. And immediately people were taking the other position, and I think a lot of what we saw in Egypt with Twitter being able to mobilize tens of thousands of people demonstrated that he was wrong.
Right, how else would that have happened?
And you know, this Susan G. Komen thing is another example of how he was wrong, because there was information in the blogosphere, there was the mainstream media, TV and newspapers were a little slow to really see how big it was. But I think as much as anything else, more than anything else, it was a Facebook phenomenon.
Right, right.
And it really, you know, we have, what is it, 800 million people in the world on Facebook, something like that. And so it can get stuff around very, very quickly, which I had a similar experience on a much tinier scale about 2 or 3 years ago. And this, which made me think that it's possible to make a difference on Facebook. You might remember the story. A couple of years ago, there was a kid whose mother tried to sign him up for Little League up in the Burlington area, and she missed the deadline by like a day. Okay. And the town Little League said, too late.
Deadlines are deadlines.
Deadlines are deadlines. You're not getting in. You know, I read about it in the Free Press on a Sunday morning. I was outraged that this was going to happen to some kid, so I wrote a blog post about it on Green Mountain Daily, and I created a Facebook group called Let This Kid Play Baseball, and I spammed all my friends and family and put it on Facebook and put the Facebook link in the blog post. And again, within the space of a few days, dozens and then hundreds of people from Vermont and New Jersey, where most of my siblings are, and all over the place, were signing on to this group saying, "Let this Matthew Mostyn play baseball." And it was only about a week after that the Little League announced, well, it turns out we do have a slot. One kid who signed up isn't going to play, so we've got a space
opened
for
up. You. Great, great. That's a nice microcosm version of what we kind of see, this narrative of pushback, really. And as a former Little League coach, I can attest to the politics of Little League, being up there with the politics of abortion. No, maybe not that bad, but well, it gets pretty intense.
I coached Little League in Montpelier, and my kids were on teams of baseball and soccer and all these things. And in Montpelier, they do it the right way. You know, we always kind of worried that they would stick us with the deadline, because one thing or another never made the deadline. Always, our kids always.
So there's built-in flexibility in Montpelier.
You don't turn away a kid who wants to play.
Great, the American way.
That's
right. American pastime, and another American pastime. Probably not a pastime because that sounds so passive, but is staying active in your community, and I encourage one and all to do so. Thanks so much for the time, Jack. That was some really good perspective on. We'll see, maybe an ever-evolving story with the Komen Foundation.
Wow, that's it. That time goes fast, doesn't it?
I believe we are through.
Okay, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I enjoyed this.
Excellent. Good night, everyone.
Look, I think you can just see the pressure that was mounting around, and you know, I'm going to always be a professional. I'm not going to go into those details. I think you can ask Komen that. But it's clear that there is enormous pressure on the organization, enormous pressure. And you know, while I disagree, I respect the organization's right to make that decision and move forward.
I know that they've offered you a severance package, which you have declined. Why'd you do that?
Look, this is a nonprofit, and I'm very much aware of that. And you know, I was doing my job, Megan, and I wasn't interested in having a paycheck or a written check for myself to just simply go away, and I wanted to do the right thing on my own terms, and that's what I tried to do.
Well, I know that they've accepted your resignation.